How can wit boost wisdom's benefits? That's the topic we're going to address today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. And today on Flourish-Meant, I have a friend and a repeat guest who I can't wait to introduce to you again. Her name is Linda Kozar. She's an award-winning, multi-published author of traditional and indie published fiction and nonfiction books, and she's got a Southern flair. She's got a new book coming out called Gimme Some Sugar and some gifts for you. So you want to make sure you listen to the end to make sure you get your free gift. Welcome, Linda. I'm glad that you're on Flourish-Meant today. It's always fun chatting with you.
Oh, I feel so blessed to be here. Thank you for having me.
So can you talk to the audience about what inspired you to do this particular little humor seasoned and sweetened devotional?
Well, I started writing devotionals when I didn't even realize I was writing devotionals because I taught a women's Bible study. It's still going on. It's going to be 31 years this year, and it's called Babes with a Beatitude. And we are all women who go to different churches. So everybody brings something unique to the table, but we share the love of Jesus, and it's awesome. It's just an awesome thing. So I would write the Bible studies instead of teaching from something else. We'd just get the fresh oil of whatever God wanted to impart to us, So I'd prepare lessons, and I always added humor. Over the years, I learned that you have to add humor in order to really take in the serious things of God. Humor really helps. And I just sort of learned that supernaturally and organically through the years. And I started writing devotions out of those lessons and out of my time with the Lord every morning.
I love that piece about humor. I do think that's important, and people skip it, people leave it out, they get too serious too fast. Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about how humor changes the way that we ingest wisdom and keep it?
Think about when you're in a tense situation, maybe you're stuck in an elevator or something, and somebody says something funny, and that sort of disarms all the anxiety and the angst, and people will listen to that person and maybe just be just entertained by them for a minute so they don't think about their situation. And that's what humor does, really. It disarms all the walls we put up, and it helps you get through to that person.
I love that humor disarms
Mhm.
us and it kind of strengthens you in some regard to be
Yeah.
resilient, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes. And I learned from my dad. He didn't know any strangers. He would walk into a room and he'd own it. He would just be so hilarious. And so he was a great influence in my life.
Yeah, my dad was the same way. He would make friends in line at the post office. I mean,
Oh,
he didn't have a
yes.
stranger. Love that.
Right.
Yes. But you didn't grow up as a believer. So moving into
No.
devotions, did you choose humor because you knew that it needed to be there in order to reach the kind of people who are where you were?
No, humor chose me. It's just who I am. I use humor just in my ordinary daily life. I mean, if I didn't have humor, I don't think I would be in good shape, because there's so many people who aren't in good shape these days. They're depressed, and it's just, these are hard times we live in, and it's hard to cope. But humor is a great natural way to cope with your situation.
It
Yeah.
does have it has a medicinal effect, I think, and it
Yes.
changes our brain chemistry to some extent. So there
Yes.
is a proverb about humor, a merry heart doing
Mhm.
good like a medicine. Is that kind
Yes.
of also one of your favorites?
Yes. Yeah, humor does. It does that for me, and I know it does that for most people. There are a few who don't have a sense of humor.
There are a few, and they're difficult to palate when you get people who have
Yes.
no sense of humor. It's hard to listen to that very long, isn't it?
I call them brambleberries. They're brambleberries are, and in fact, I have a devotion on that in the book. They're people that are just so angry and not nice. But maybe if you get to know them more, you can discover their soft side, and get through. So there's a way to get to the sweet juice of a brambleberry if you just persist with them a little bit.
I love that sweet juice in brambleberries. So you're looking for
Yeah.
the sweet pieces in the rich, deep truth there in your
Right,
devotional. Is that something
right.
that's important to you because of where you
Yeah.
came from, your journey of faith?
Oh, sure. I mean, I consider it an advantage, and I'm glad that I didn't grow up knowing the Lord because even though I went through some hard stuff, I know the difference between the dark and the light. And I know how differently I felt the moment I was born again and how I felt before. So I'll always remember that. I'll never forget.
So, with a devotional that has humor, is that something that is more has more potential to be evangelistic in nature to people who aren't from a faith background?
I think so, but it also ministers to people who have been believers for most of their life or all of their life. You know, everybody needs it. Everybody needs that little humor, especially Southern humor, which is kind of sassy, you know, just a more than a little bit sassy sometimes, but it's fun. It's always fun.
Okay, give us a little taste of what it means to have Southern humor as opposed to other kinds of humor. How is it a little different?
Southern humor, for instance, if you say, well, bless her heart, you know, I mean, that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It's kind of like aloha. You know, aloha means, I don't know how many things, but it depends on how you say it and what your attitude and your heart attitude is. You know, if someone's going through a hard time, you can say, well, bless her heart. I'm praying for her. Or you could be talking about somebody that you don't like very much or who's rude to you and say, well, bless her heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I heard that in Steel Magnolias actually, where they were talking
Yes.
about how somebody didn't quite fit in their dress and they said, bless her heart. It's kind
Right.
of, yeah, it's kind of like the way of justifying your gossip sometimes, too, is another way that that's
Oh,
used.
oh, definitely. They could say something like, that dress is so tight, you could strike a match on it.
So you're not blessing people's hearts with your devotional in that snarky kind of Southern humor way, but what are some ways that we can add Southern humor into the way that we look at scripture that makes it more tasty and sweeter?
I really do believe that God has a sense of humor, you know, and He created us to have a sense of humor and not, some people consider they kind of have a mean sense of humor, but I don't consider that humor. When Elijah was telling the pagan priest, maybe your God is off going to the bathroom somewhere. I mean, that is humor to me. And then Paul pitting the Pharisees and the Sadducees against one another. I mean, he had a sense of humor to do that. And think of the creatures God created. I mean, the platypus, for example. He must have had a sense of humor when he created that.
I'm really grateful that God has a sense of humor when he listens to some of the silly things that I say to him instead of getting angry. And I think it helps us to
Right.
recognize that God has grace in his humor, right?
You wonder what he's thinking when we're trying to justify our sins before him and we're making all these excuses and he's just rolling his eyes.
Tell us what your favorite devotion story comes from in that book that you have. Gimme Some Sugar.
Well, my favorite one is Operation You, and it's on page 26. And I liken our state of holding on to things to the Operation game. If you remember the Operation game, where you would have electroprobe tweezers and you'd go in and you take out a funny bone or this or that. And I liken it to us holding on to things like unforgiveness or pride or whatever, and not wanting God to surrender to God to take those out of us and to be healed and whole. And every time God tries to help us get rid of something that we need to get rid of, the tweezers go off, all the bells and whistles go off, and we're just not ready to do it. But the point of the devotion is to just surrender and allow God to do that so he can use you in the way he wants to use you.
Speaking of this wonderful devotion example, how can people get a copy of Give Me Some Sugar and stay connected with you and get the free gift that we mentioned at the beginning?
Well, I like to say, as many other authors do, wherever fine books are sold, but it really is sold at a lot of places where my books have never been sold before, like Target, and it's really all over the place because I check it every day to see any new locations, both brick and mortar and online. It's everywhere, so it's very easy to get a copy of. And I have it. Let's see, I have it right here. I just got them in 2 days ago. So it has a nice ribbon in it, a little marker, and that's what they look like on the inside.
Wonderful. So
Yeah.
if you are listening on audio only, make sure that you go to YouTube so that you can see this book. And Linda, do you have a website that you would like people to know about as well?
I do. LindaKozar.com. I'm also on all social media. And also for listening to this podcast, I do have a free PDF um, that is available if you sign up for either Tina's newsletter or my newsletter. We will send you this 12-page PDF with recipes and all sorts of funny Southern sayings and lists and just silly stuff. But it'll crack a smile. You'll crack a smile when you get it.
All right. So for your free smile and your PDF, make sure that you check out the links that are going to be in the notes and get that free gift. Thank you so much, Linda. I hope that all of you listening were inspired to include more wit so you can more deeply receive and keep hold of wisdom in your life. And I hope, of course, that you will also access Linda's wonderful PDF, her website, and Gimme Some Sugar. And of course, I also hope that you hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourishment.